I am Captain Nora Adams, and the first thing you should know about me is that the quiet ones are never as harmless as people think. The second thing is that I never start problems, but I finish them cleanly. That is how I ended up with my arm locked around a man's neck in the middle of my family's celebration, holding him steady, while the entire backyard froze like someone had cut the power to the world. The only sound was his choking breath and the dull thump of his boots scraping against the packed dirt. A plastic cup rolled in a lazy circle near my knee as if it had no idea it had just witnessed a disaster. The dust we kicked up hung in the afternoon light, turning the scene into something that felt unreal, like a moment suspended between one heartbeat and the next. I kept my grip firm but controlled. My forearm pressed against the sides of his neck, not the front. His hands clawed at my wrist, even though I knew he could not break the hold. I felt his pulse hammer against my bicep in fast, panicked bursts that told me I had only seconds before he went out. I knew exactly how many seconds, because counting them was part of the job long before this day. Behind us, I heard my relatives shouting, but the sound felt distant, almost muted, like I was underwater. No one moved to help him. No one moved to stop me. They just stared at the daughter, niece, and sister, who they thought worked behind a desk. Their faces were a strange mix of fear, confusion, and disbelief, as if they were all seeing me for the first time and had no idea what to do with that information. The man in my arms bucked once more, putting everything he had into a desperate attempt to break free. It failed. His strength crashed against my technique like a wave breaking on a rock. I tightened the hold by a fraction, just enough to end the fight without ending him. His movements slowed, then faded into nothing. I lowered him gently to the ground, keeping my hands up as I stepped back. My heart rate never changed. My breathing stayed even. No one else in the yard could say the same. To understand how we got here, you have to rewind a few hours. The sun hung low over Fort Belvoir, painting long shadows across the grass and making the white folding chairs glare in the heat. Someone had strung red, white, and blue bunting around the gazebo, and a Bluetooth speaker was playing a country song about boots and honor. The smell of overcooked burgers mixed with sunscreen and warm beer drifted across the courtyard, blending into something that stuck to the back of your throat. Ethan stood near the grill like a statue unveiled for the occasion, chest out, uniform crisp, with his brand new silver bars gleaming in the light. He was surrounded by relatives handing him plates, handing him praise, and handing him their full attention. Every story he told, no matter how shallow, was met with nods and wide eyes, as if each word carried sacred weight. I watched from a few feet away, tucked into the corner near a picnic table, trying to shrink into my seat without actually disappearing. My blouse stuck to my skin under my jacket, and my iced tea had already gone warm, but I stayed where I was. I was out of uniform by design and invisible by default. Ethan's voice carried across the space like a foghorn. Third in my class. Drill sergeant said I had natural leadership. The cousins clapped, and one of the aunts dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. No one asked me how my week was. No one noticed I hadn't spoken in nearly half an hour. It wasn't jealousy. I didn't need their applause or care for their approval. What stung was the way the story of the day had already been written, and I wasn't in it. I could have recited debriefs from 3 different continents, but to them, I was still the girl who chose not to wear a uniform to family events. They saw a new officer. I saw a rookie playing soldier. I knew the difference. But I also knew the rule. Don't disrupt the narrative. Sit, smile, stay quiet. So I sipped my tea and waited for the part where someone finally asked what I do for a living, just so they could interrupt halfway through and ask Ethan another question about boot camp. My mother caught me standing near the cooler and rushed over like I was something that needed explaining. "This is Nora," she told one of her old college friends. "She's in logistics with the government." She smiled like she was delivering a weather report, something bland and safe that wouldn't ruin anyone's appetite. The woman nodded politely, eyes already shifting back toward the crowd around Ethan. I said nothing, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew from experience that explaining would only make things worse. At the buffet table, one of my aunts gasped as Ethan showed a bruise on his arm. "From rifle drills," he said, grinning like he'd wrestled a bear. "We trained through the pain." They clucked and cooed like he'd survived a plane crash. I'd once stitched my own arm closed in the back of a moving vehicle. No one ever asked why I have scars on my hands. They didn't mean to insult me. That's what made it harder to ignore. To them, I was just a smart girl with a boring job. I didn't wear medals, and I didn't bring home war stories they could understand. They couldn't picture covert insertions or asset extractions. They could barely picture me in boots. I kept my smile fixed, nodding at the right moments, sipping my drink like I was part of the party. Inside, I ran through a mental slideshow of the past year. 12-hour surveillance shifts in frozen cities. Code words exchanged in crowded train stations. The time I held a dying man's hand in a warehouse in Kyiv and told him he was safe, even though we both knew he wasn't. They didn't see that. They saw a single woman with no uniform, no kids, and no ring. My mother's friend leaned in and said, "Maybe you'll meet someone soon. Logistics can be lonely, huh?" I just smiled again, teeth tight, heartbeat steady. The best covers are the ones no one questions. They wanted heroes they could understand. Ethan wore his on his sleeves. I kept mine locked down in files they'd never see. And every time they dismissed me, I reminded myself I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to remind myself why I don't come home more often. They call it logistics because it's easier to digest than what I actually do. My real job falls under a different branch of the Department of Defense. I don't push paper. I don't coordinate shipping routes. I teach people how to survive when every rule breaks and there's no one coming to save them. 2 weeks ago, I was standing barefoot on the mat at a training facility so far off the map, it didn't even have a name. The man across from me was a former college linebacker, built like a refrigerator and twice as stubborn. He smirked as if I were the warm-up round, some prelude to the real challenge. I waited. I always wait. Let them move first, reveal themselves. He lunged, sloppy and aggressive, trying to overpower me with speed and weight. I slipped under his center of gravity, shifted my hip just enough, and redirected his own force straight into the ground. The room went quiet, except for the slap of his body hitting the mat. While he gasped, I reset his stance with a hand on his back and whispered, "Don't fight physics, use it." I wasn't showing off, I was instructing. Teaching someone how not to die takes more than muscle. It takes control. The same kind I practice every day, including now, with a plastic cup, sweating in my hand, and a fake smile on my face. People don't expect it from someone like me. They see glasses, cardigans, and administrative titles. They don't see the secured communications, the classified briefings, the kill house walkthroughs. They don't see the lives that hang in the balance when I make a call, or don't. In the last 18 months, I've moved through 3 continents under 3 different aliases. I've extracted assets under fire and negotiated with warlords in broken languages. I've watched good people bleed out because the timing was off by seconds. There's no spreadsheet for that. And yet, here, under the string lights and paper plates, I let them believe I'm just another quiet cousin who doesn't like confrontation. It's safer that way. For them. And sometimes for me. The truth is, it takes far more discipline to hide what I'm capable of than to use it. Anyone can throw a punch. Very few can hold it back with the kind of control that leaves no mark, no clue, and no trail. That's the work. That's the skill. That's what they'll never understand until it's far too late. Grandpa was sitting alone near the back edge of the lawn, where the folding chairs thinned out and the noise didn't reach as easily. He had a scotch in one hand and a steady gaze that had seen more than anyone else here could imagine. His chair faced the crowd, but his eyes were on me. I hadn't said a word to him yet. I didn't need to. He saw the way I kept my back to the fence, not out of habit, but because habit had become instinct. He noticed how my eyes flicked toward exits, how I never let my drink out of arm's reach, how I moved through the space like I was still on a mission. He didn't look away when our eyes met. He didn't smile or frown. He just tipped his glass, a small motion that most would miss but hit me like a nod across a battlefield. I nodded back, barely, a breath of acknowledgement. That was the conversation. No applause, no speech, no need to ask what I did for a living. He already knew. He had seen the signs, because once you've carried certain memories, you start recognizing the weight in others. Most of the family treated Ethan like he was made of gold, a polished version of what they thought courage looked like. But Grandpa knew the difference between performance and presence. He knew what it meant to sit quietly and still and alert, while everyone else laughed too loudly. That kind of awareness doesn't come from training manuals or parade grounds. It comes from surviving things you never talk about. And he saw it in me, clear as day, even though the rest of the family didn't have a clue. His glance didn't linger. He sipped his drink and turned his eyes back toward the group, letting me return to my silence without fanfare. But something shifted in me. Not pride, exactly. More like relief. Someone saw me. Really saw me. And it meant more than any medal I'd ever been handed. The only people who recognize ghosts are the ones who carry them too. Grandpa wasn't trying to fix me or praise me or put me in a box. He just saw the armor I never take off. And that was enough. Ethan had shifted from proud to restless as the sun dropped behind the treetops. His stories got louder, his laughs a little too sharp, and the way he moved through the yard felt less like confidence and more like someone looking for something to punch. When he spotted 12-year-old Max near the swing set, it was like watching a spark land on dry brush. He called Max over, grinning widely, and said he was going to show everyone how to carry out a fireman's lift. Max laughed nervously, but his feet didn't move. Ethan stepped closer, already crouching like this was a game, like there was no way the kid could or should say no. Max backed up, hands raised, eyes darting toward the adults who were too busy with drinks to notice. I saw it unfold in seconds. The shift in Max's posture. The way Ethan's voice lost all its charm. The crowd hadn't noticed yet, but I did. I walked forward, slow but direct, and said, "Stand down, Ethan." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The words cut through the music and chatter like a sharp blade. Everything stopped. Max froze. Ethan blinked, thrown by the tone, by the fact that someone dared correct him. A few aunts turned toward me, already frowning. My mother was one of them, her eyes narrowing as I'd just embarrassed the whole family. Ethan stood, turning toward me with flushed cheeks and glassy eyes. "You think you get to give me orders now?" he said, stepping into my space. "You sit behind a desk, Nora. I actually serve." He spread his arms like he was ready to perform. "Come on, let's see if logistics can throw a punch." The air thickened around us. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't flinch. I held my ground, not out of pride, but because someone had to draw the line. The boy behind him was still watching, scared, waiting for an adult to act like one. I glanced at the rest of the family. Some looked confused, some looked amused. No one moved. No one told him to stop. I wasn't angry. I was done waiting for permission to protect the people who needed it. "You're drunk," I said, calm and clear. "Let the kid go." And just like that, the party turned. Not because I was wrong, but because I had dared to make the truth uncomfortable. Ethan moved first. He lowered his shoulder like he was trying to tackle me off a football field, all bluster and bad balance. I didn't move back. I stepped to the side. A clean pivot. 45 degrees. My boots dug into the dirt just enough to keep me stable. His momentum carried him forward like a freight train with no brakes. As he passed, I caught his wrist with one hand and swept his legs with the other. His feet left the ground. He landed hard, shoulder first, a dull thud punching into the lawn. He grunted, dazed, trying to roll, but I was already behind him. No wasted motion, just the mechanics of a practiced response. My left arm slipped under his chin. My right hand braced the back of his head. I locked the rear naked choke without hesitation. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was clean. I didn't crush his windpipe. I closed the blood flow to his brain. 10 seconds, maybe less. That's all it would take. I felt the pulse in his neck hammer against my arm, wild and fast, then begin to slow. The family stopped breathing. I could feel it, the stunned silence pressing in from all sides. Someone dropped a plate. Someone whispered my name. No one moved to help him. Ethan clawed at my forearm, more instinct than strategy. I shifted my weight, pinning his back. No struggling, no panic, just physics. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Tap out," I told him, "or go to sleep." He tapped. 3 quick slaps on the grass. I released the hold immediately and rolled back, keeping 6 feet of distance between us as I stood. My breathing was steady. My pulse didn't spike. Ethan stayed down, coughing, red-faced, humiliated. He looked up at me like he'd seen a ghost. "You cheated," he rasped. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer him. Not right away. Instead, I adjusted my jacket, brushed the dust from my pants, and looked around. Everyone saw it. No one could pretend anymore. The quiet girl from logistics had just taken the golden boy apart without breaking a sweat. I stepped forward, just enough to look him in the eye. "That was restraint," I said. "You're lucky I was feeling generous." And for the first time all day, no one had anything to say. Ethan was on his knees, still wheezing, one hand braced against the grass. His face was flushed with humiliation more than pain. He looked up like he didn't know what had just happened, as the ground had betrayed him. I stood still, hands relaxed, posture clean. "That was a level 4 control hold," I said quietly, knowing full well no one else would understand what that meant. If I wanted to hurt him, I would have crushed his trachea. A gasp rippled through the patio crowd. Not because I was brutal, but because I was calm. That was the part that scared them. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't lost control. I had chosen not to destroy him, and somehow that made me dangerous. Ethan's hands trembled as he tried to get up. I didn't move to help him, not out of spite, but because mercy wasn't weakness. I had already shown him all the mercy he was going to get. My mother rushed to his side, kneeling in the dirt, cradling his head as he'd come back from combat. "You're unstable," she snapped at me, eyes sharp with panic. "He was just playing. What is wrong with you?" That word, unstable, clung to the air like smoke. It's what people say when a woman refuses to stay in her place, when her strength isn't loud and showy, but cold and quiet and terrifying in its precision. I looked around at the faces I had grown up with. They weren't scared because I lost control. They were scared because I hadn't. Because I had the ability to hurt and the clarity to choose not to. They would have preferred if I'd screamed or slapped him or made a scene. Something familiar. Something they could dismiss as drama. But what I gave them instead was a glimpse of what real control looks like. And they didn't know what to do with it, so they turned on me. Because it's easier to fear what you don't understand than admit you were wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't explain further. I just let the silence sit there, heavy and undeniable. Grandpa set his glass down with a quiet clink and rose slowly, his movements deliberate. The backyard hushed as he walked past the cluster of aunts and over to Ethan, who still hadn't found his footing. He looked down, then over at me, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, she showed him mercy. If that was a real fight, he wouldn't be standing. No one argued. Not a single voice dared break the silence. Grandpa turned to me, met my eyes, and gave a slow, firm nod. It was the only validation I'd ever wanted, and the only one I needed. My mother stood up, brushing grass from her knees, her face stiff with a mix of fear and the old, familiar disappointment. "You are not leaving like this," she said, voice rising. "You owe your cousin an apology. You ruined the entire afternoon." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye and said, "I don't work in admin, Mom." She blinked, unsure what to do with the words. "I don't come home to be talked down to by people who've never spent a single day in the real world," I continued. "Don't invite me next year." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked to the patio table, picked up my keys, and turned toward the gate. My steps were steady. My heart was quiet. Behind me, the family stood frozen. No one tried to stop me. No one said my name. The air was thick with confusion and something else. Fear, maybe. Or finally, a glimpse of who I really was. I reached the side gate and lifted the latch. The metal clicked shut behind me with a finality that felt less like leaving and more like stepping out of something I'd outgrown. I didn't look back. The street was quiet. No applause, no music. Just the sound of my footsteps, solid and certain. I had nothing left to prove. Not to them. That version of me, the one who shrank to fit their comfort, was gone. What I gave them today wasn't just a chokehold. It was the truth. And it scared them. But it freed me. 6 months later, I was standing in a windowless safe house on the edge of Eastern Europe. The walls hummed from reinforced wiring, the air thick with the scent of coffee and ozone. Outside, rain slapped against steel. Inside, my team waited. 4 of the most capable operators I'd ever worked with, sitting in silence, watching me for the next move. When I spoke, they listened. We were on standby for a green light from DC. Tension sat in the room like a second skin, but it was familiar, even comforting. This was where I belonged, in the silence before the storm. My personal phone buzzed once in my pack, a sound I usually ignored in ops, but we had time. I pulled it out and saw the name. Ethan. The message was short. No bravado, no jokes, no emojis. I watched the tape. My team asked where you learned that. I didn't answer. I get it now. Sorry. I stared at it for a second. I thought about the backyard, the silence after the choke, the way my mother looked at me like I was broken. I thought about Grandpa's nod and the sound of the gate closing behind me. Then I swiped left, deleted the message, dropped the phone back in my bag. I didn't need his apology. I had already won. Not the fight. The fight was never the point. I had broken their story of me and written my own. I turned to my team. No explanations, just a nod. We go in 5, I said. Heads nodded back. No questions. Just trust. Some people fight loudly. They need to be seen. But some of us fight quietly, and we win before the world even knows we're on the field.